The blood on Yates Crawford's knuckles was still fresh when he stumbled into the saloon, and every head turned to watch him make his way to the farthest corner table, away from the judgmental stares and whispered gossip that always followed him like a shadow. It was September of 1883 in Valentine, Nebraska, a town that had grown around the railroad and cattle industry, where fortunes were made and lost on the turn of a card or the strength of a handshake. Yates had neither fortune nor reputation to speak of, only a past that clung to him like the dust from the trail. He was 24 years old, tall and lean with dark hair that fell across his forehead, and eyes that held the weight of things he wished he could forget. The scars on his hands told stories he never spoke aloud, and the limp in his left leg reminded him daily of the beating he had taken from 3 ranch hands 2 towns over who had decided he looked like an easy target. The saloon was crowded that evening, filled with cowboys fresh off the range, their pockets heavy with wages and their throats parched for whiskey. Yates ordered water from the barkeep, who gave him a look of disgust before slamming the glass down so hard half of it sloshed onto the counter. "Water," the barkeep muttered loud enough for others to hear. "Real man drinks whiskey." A few men at the bar laughed, but Yates kept his eyes down. He had learned long ago that responding only made things worse. His father had been a drunk who had beaten his mother until she died when Yates was 16, and he had sworn on her grave that he would never touch alcohol. That vow had earned him mockery in every town he had passed through, as if abstaining from whiskey made him less of a man in this harsh land where strength was measured in how much you could drink and how well you could fight. "Hey, Crawford," a voice called out from across the room. Yates recognized it immediately. Marcus Stone, a ranch foreman who had taken an instant dislike to him the moment Yates had arrived in Valentine 3 weeks ago looking for work. "I heard you turned down a drink at the Miller Ranch last week. What kind of coward refuses hospitality?" The saloon grew quieter, and Yates felt the familiar tightening in his chest. He kept his gaze on the water glass, his fingers gripping it so tightly his knuckles whitened. "Maybe he is afraid he will cry like a little girl," another man chimed in, and the laughter grew louder. "Or maybe he knows he cannot hold his liquor like a real man," Marcus continued, standing now and walking toward Yates's table. He was a big man, broad-shouldered and thick-armed, with a cruel mouth that seemed permanently twisted into a sneer. "I bet you cannot even ride a horse proper. Probably fall off the first time it bucks." Yates had worked with horses since he was old enough to walk. His father might have been worthless, but his grandfather had taught him everything about ranching before he passed. Still, Yates said nothing. He had no desire to prove himself to men like Marcus Stone. Leave him alone. The voice was clear and firm, cutting through the noise of the saloon like a blade. Every head turned toward the source, and Yates looked up to see a woman standing near the entrance. She was perhaps 22 or 23, with auburn hair pulled back in a practical bun, though loose strands framed a face that was both pretty and determined. Her dress was simple but clean, the dark blue fabric suitable for work rather than show. She carried a basket over one arm, and Yates recognized her as Sophia Jenkins, the schoolteacher who had arrived in Valentine about 6 months ago from somewhere back east. "This does not concern you, Miss Jenkins," Marcus said, though his tone was more careful now. Even rough men thought twice before being openly rude to a schoolteacher. "It concerns me when I see grown men acting like bullies in a schoolyard," Sophia replied, walking further into the saloon. Her boots clicked against the wooden floor, and despite the hostile environment, she held her head high. "Mocking a man for his personal choices says far more about your character than his." "He is a coward," another man said. "Will not drink, will not fight. What good is a man like that? A man who keeps his word is worth 10 who break theirs over a bottle, Sophia said sharply. And from what I have heard, Mr. Crawford has worked harder than most of you in the past 3 weeks, despite being paid half wages and given the worst jobs. Yates stared at her in amazement. How did she know that? He had barely spoken to anyone in town, keeping to himself as much as possible. The schoolteacher has a soft spot for strays, Marcus said with a nasty grin. Maybe she is looking for a pet. Maybe I simply recognize decency when I see it, Sophia shot back. Which is more than I can say for some people in this room. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Marcus looked like he wanted to say more, but the saloon owner, a grizzled man named Henderson, stepped forward. That is enough, Henderson said firmly. Miss Jenkins, your supplies are ready in the back. Marcus, you and your boys settle down or take it outside. Marcus glared at Sophia, then at Yates, before turning back to his friends at the bar. Not worth my time anyway, he muttered. Sophia walked to the bar to collect whatever she had come for, and Yates sat frozen in his chair, his heart pounding. No one had ever stood up for him like that, not since his mother had died. He watched as she spoke quietly with Henderson, then accepted a wrapped package and placed it in her basket. As she turned to leave, her eyes met his for just a moment, and she gave him a small nod before walking out into the evening air. Yates sat there for several more minutes, finishing his water in silence while the saloon gradually returned to its normal volume. But everything felt different now. Something had shifted, though he could not quite name what it was. When he finally left the saloon, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Valentine was not a large town, just a main street with a handful of businesses, a church, a schoolhouse, and clusters of homes spreading out in all directions. Yates had been sleeping in the stable where he worked, earning his keep by mucking stalls and mending fences for old man Peterson, who owned a small ranch on the edge of town. But tonight, instead of heading straight back, Yates found himself walking toward the schoolhouse. He did not know what he would say if he found Sophia there, but he felt compelled to at least try to thank her for what she had done. The schoolhouse was a simple one-room building with a small house attached to the side where the teacher lived. Light glowed from the windows, and as Yates approached, he could see Sophia moving around inside through the curtains. He stood outside for a long moment, gathering his courage before finally knocking on the door. The movement inside stopped, and then the door opened. Sophia stood there in the lamplight, her expression cautious but not unfriendly. "Mr. Crawford," she said, "I did not expect to see you." "I wanted to thank you," Yates said, his voice rougher than he intended. "For what you said in the saloon, you did not have to do that." "No one should have to endure that kind of treatment," Sophia replied. "May I ask why you came to Valentine?" "Looking for work," Yates said. "Same as always, I move around a lot." "Because of how people treat you," he nodded slowly. "Mostly." Sophia studied him for a moment, then stepped back from the door. "Would you like to come in for some coffee? I know you do not drink alcohol, but surely coffee is acceptable." Yates hesitated. It would not look good for her reputation if anyone saw a man entering her home in the evening, but the kindness in her offer was too genuine to refuse. "If you are sure it is all right." "I am sure," she said firmly. "Besides, I could use the company. It gets lonely here sometimes." He stepped inside, removing his hat as he did so. The interior was small but comfortable, with a table and chairs, a stove and shelves lined with books. Everything was neat and organized, the mark of someone who valued order in their life. Sophia poured 2 cups of coffee from a pot on the stove and gestured for him to sit. Yates took a chair at the table, still feeling awkward and out of place in this clean, peaceful space. "How did you know?" he asked as she sat across from him. "About the work I have been doing. I make it my business to know what happens in this town," Sophia said, "especially when it involves treating people unfairly. I heard from Peterson himself that you have been the best worker he has had in years, but that the other men refuse to work alongside you because of some foolish prejudice." "They think I am weak," Yates said quietly, "because I will not drink." "That is their failing, not yours," Sophia replied. "Strength comes in many forms. Keeping a vow, especially a difficult one, requires more strength than most people possess. You sound like you speak from experience." Sophia wrapped her hands around her coffee cup, her gaze distant for a moment. "I suppose I do. I came here from Boston against my family's wishes. They wanted me to marry a banker and live a proper society life. But I wanted to teach, to make a difference in a place where education was desperately needed. They said I was throwing my life away, that I would never survive out here on my own." "But you did," Yates said. "But I did," she agreed with a small smile. "It has not been easy. Some people here think a woman has no business teaching, especially one from back east. But I have managed." They talked for over an hour, and Yates found himself opening up in ways he had not done with anyone in years. He told her about his mother, about his father's violence, about the vow he had made. Sophia listened without judgment, her eyes full of understanding rather than pity. "My father was violent too," she said quietly when he finished. "Not with drink, but with words. He could cut a person down to nothing with just a few sentences. I think that is why I became a teacher. I wanted to build people up instead of tearing them down." When Yates finally left that night, the stars were bright overhead, and he felt lighter than he had in months. Sophia had given him something precious, the sense that he was not alone, that someone understood. The next morning, Yates arrived at Peterson's ranch before dawn as usual, ready to start the day's work. But Peterson met him at the stable with an uncomfortable expression on his weathered face. "Crawford, we need to talk," the old man said. Yates felt his stomach sink. He had heard those words before, always followed by being told to move on. "Marcus Stone came by last night," Peterson continued. "He and some of the other ranchers in the area. They said if I keep you on, they will not do business with me anymore. Will not sell me cattle, will not help with the roundup, nothing." "I understand," Yates said, keeping his voice steady even as disappointment washed over him. "Now hold on," Peterson said, raising a hand. "I did not say I was letting you go. I am just telling you what he said. Far as I am concerned, you are the best worker I have had, and if Marcus Stone has a problem with that, he can take it up with me directly." Yates looked at the old man in surprise. "You are keeping me on." "Damn right I am," Peterson said. "I am too old to let bullies tell me how to run my ranch, but I wanted you to know what is happening in case things get difficult." "Thank you," Yates said, his throat tight with emotion. "I will work twice as hard, I promise." "You already work twice as hard," Peterson replied with a grunt. "Just keep doing what you are doing." As the days passed, Yates threw himself into his work with renewed determination. He mended every fence that needed fixing, broke 3 wild horses that Peterson had been unable to sell because no one else could handle them, and organized the barn so efficiently that Peterson could find any tool or piece of equipment within seconds. But the trouble Peterson had warned about began to manifest in small ways. Supplies that Peterson ordered from the general store were accidentally delayed or lost. The blacksmith suddenly doubled his prices for shoeing Peterson's horses. And Marcus Stone made sure to spread rumors that anyone who associated with Peterson or his coward hired hand would face similar treatment. Through it all, Sophia remained a steady presence. She began stopping by Peterson's ranch once a week on her way home from school. always with some excuse about needing to check on one of her students who lived nearby, but really to see how Yates was doing. They would talk by the fence line, and those conversations became the highlight of Yates's week. One afternoon in early October, about a month after their first meeting, Sophia arrived at the ranch looking troubled. Yates was working on replacing some rotten boards in the stable when he heard her call his name. "What is wrong?" he asked immediately, setting down his hammer. "Marcus Stone came to the schoolhouse today," she said, her voice tight with anger. "He told me I should be more careful about the company I keep, said that a schoolteacher should set a better example for the children." Yates felt fury rise in his chest. "He threatened you." "Not directly," Sophia admitted, "but the implication was clear. He thinks he can intimidate me into avoiding you." "Maybe you should," Yates said, though the words cost him. "I do not want to cause you trouble." "You are not causing trouble," Sophia said fiercely. "Marcus Stone is causing trouble, and I will not let him dictate who I can and cannot speak with." "Sophia, your job, my job, is secure as long as I am a good teacher," "Which I am," she interrupted. "The parents may listen to Marcus about business matters, but they know their children are learning and thriving. That matters more than his petty grudges." Yates wanted to believe her, but he had seen too many times how easily a community could turn against someone once the poison started spreading. "I just do not want you to suffer because of me." Sophia stepped closer, close enough that he could see the gold flecks in her brown eyes. "Yates, I am going to tell you something, and I need you to listen. I have never met anyone with as much quiet strength as you possess. You keep your word even when it costs you. You work hard without complaint. You treat people with respect even when they show you none in return. That is the kind of character I admire. That is the kind of character I choose to associate with, and no bully is going to change my mind." Her words struck something deep in his chest, and Yates found himself unable to look away from her. "Why?" he asked quietly. "Why do you care?" "Because someone should," Sophia said simply. "And because I see you, Yates. Not the rumors, not the mockery. I see who you really are." In that moment, standing in the fading afternoon light with the smell of hay and horses around them, Yates realized he was falling in love with her. The thought terrified him. He had nothing to offer her, no future to promise, but the way she looked at him with such certainty and trust made him want to be worthy of those things. "I see you too," he said softly, "and you are remarkable." A blush colored Sophia's cheeks, and she smiled. "We should probably get you back to work before Peterson thinks I am distracting his best employee." "You are distracting me," Yates admitted, "but I do not mind." Over the following weeks, Yates and Sophia grew closer. They continued their conversations by the fence line, but now there was a new dimension to their interactions, an awareness of feelings that had taken root and were growing stronger each day. Yates found himself looking forward to her visits with an intensity that made it hard to focus on work. And from the way Sophia's face lit up whenever she saw him, he suspected she felt the same, but their budding romance did not go unnoticed. Marcus Stone watched them with increasing hostility, and he began to escalate his campaign against Yates and anyone who supported him. He convinced several other ranchers to refuse to hire any of Peterson's cattle for breeding. He spread rumors that Yates was not just a coward but potentially dangerous, someone with a violent past who could not be trusted. The rumors were particularly cruel because there was a grain of truth to them. Yates did have a violent past, though not in the way Marcus implied. He had left his hometown after nearly killing his father in self-defense, when the old man had come at him with a knife during a drunken rage. Yates had won that fight, but the guilt and fear of what he was capable of had driven him away. He had been running ever since, trying to prove to himself that he was not his father's son. On a cold November morning, Yates arrived at the ranch to find Peterson sitting on his porch with a grim expression. The old man gestured for Yates to join him, and dread settled in Yates's stomach. "They hit us hard this time," Peterson said without preamble. "3 of my best cattle were found dead in the north pasture this morning, poisoned from the looks of it." "Marcus?" Yates asked, though he already knew the answer. "Cannot prove it," Peterson said, "but yeah, I would bet my ranch on it. He is trying to force me to let you go by making it impossible for me to keep running this place." "Then I will leave," Yates said immediately. "I cannot let you lose everything because of me." "Now hold on," Peterson said. "I did not say I was giving up. But I need you to understand what we are up against. This is not just about you anymore. Marcus has convinced himself that you are some kind of threat to the whole town, and he is gathering support." "What kind of support?" "He is planning something," Peterson said. "I heard from a friend in town that he has been talking about running you out of Valentine, by force if necessary. Says a man who will not stand up for himself has no place here." Yates felt the old familiar shame rising up, mixing with anger and frustration. "I can stand up for myself," he said quietly. "I have before." "I know you can," Peterson said, looking at him carefully. "Question is, will you?" Before Yates could answer, they heard a horse approaching fast. Both men stood as Sophia came riding up on a borrowed mare, her face flushed with exertion and worry. "Yates," she called out, dismounting quickly. "You need to come to town, now." "What happened?" "Marcus and his men," Sophia said breathlessly. "They are at the saloon and they are saying terrible things. They have convinced half the town that you are dangerous, that you are going to hurt someone. They are gathering a group to come out here and force you to leave." "Let them come," Yates said, his jaw tight. "I am tired of running." "No," Sophia said firmly. "That is not the answer. Violence will only prove their point. We need to handle this differently." "How?" Yates asked. "How do you reason with people who have already made up their minds?" "By showing them the truth," Sophia said. "The whole town will be gathering for the harvest festival tomorrow. I want you to be there. I want you to stand in front of everyone and tell them your story. Let them see who you really are." "They will not listen," Yates said, shaking his head. "They never do." "They will listen to me," Sophia said. "I am the schoolteacher. People respect my opinion, and if I stand beside you and vouch for you, others will follow." "Sophia, if you do that, you will be tying yourself to me," Yates said. "If this goes wrong, your reputation will suffer." "I do not care about my reputation," Sophia said, though her voice shook slightly. "I care about what is right, and I care about you." The admission hung in the air between them, and Yates felt his heart pound against his ribs. "You should not," he said hoarsely. "I have nothing to offer you. No money, no prospects, and if I stay here there will always be people like Marcus trying to drive me away." "Then we will face them together," Sophia said, stepping closer and taking his hand. Her fingers were warm against his calloused palm. "Yates, I am not asking you to be perfect. I am asking you to be brave enough to stay and fight for a life here. A life with me, if you want it." Yates looked down at their joined hands, then up into her determined face. He had spent so many years running, convinced that he did not deserve happiness or stability. But Sophia was offering him something he had never dared to hope for, a chance at a real life, with someone who saw past his flaws and valued him anyway. "I want it," he said quietly, "more than anything, but I am afraid." "So am I," Sophia admitted, "but we do not have to do this alone. We have Peterson. We have the students and their families who know I am a good teacher. We have people in this town who value fairness over fear. We just need to give them a reason to speak up." Peterson had been listening to their exchange, and now he cleared his throat. "The lady is right," he said gruffly. "You have been running for too long, son. Maybe it is time to plant your feet and make a stand." Yates looked between the two of them, these people who believed in him when he had stopped believing in himself. Maybe Sophia was right. Maybe it was time to stop running. "All right," he said finally. "I will be at the festival tomorrow, and I will tell them everything." The Harvest Festival was a tradition in Valentine, held every year to celebrate the end of the growing season and the successful cattle drives. The entire town gathered in the open field near the church, with tables laden with food, games for the children, and a makeshift stage where announcements and speeches were given. Yates spent the morning helping Peterson prepare for the festival, but his mind was elsewhere. He kept rehearsing what he would say, how he would explain his past without sounding defensive or weak. Sophia had promised to meet him there, and the thought of seeing her gave him courage even as his stomach churned with nerves. When they arrived at the festival, the field was already crowded with people. Yates could feel the stares following him as he walked beside Peterson, heard the whispers that stopped abruptly when he looked in their direction. Marcus Stone was there with his group of supporters, watching Yates with undisguised hostility. Sophia found them near the food tables, looking beautiful in a green dress that brought out the warmth in her eyes. She smiled when she saw Yates, and some of his tension eased. "Are you ready?" she asked quietly. "As ready as I will ever be," he replied. The speeches began after lunch. The mayor spoke about the successful harvest, the railroad agent discussed plans for expansion, and then it was time for community concerns. Marcus Stone stood up before anyone else could speak. "I have something to say," Marcus announced loudly. "We have a problem in our town, and it is time we addressed it." Yates felt every eye turn toward him. This was it, the moment he had been dreading. "We have a man living among us who refuses to act like a man," Marcus continued, "who will not drink with his fellow workers, who will not defend his honor, who sneaks around at night visiting the homes of respectable women." A murmur went through the crowd, and Yates saw several people looking between him and Sophia with disapproving expressions. "I say we do not need his kind here," Marcus declared. "I say we tell him to move on before he brings trouble to our town." "That is enough," Sophia said, standing up from where she had been sitting with several other women. Her voice rang out clear and strong across the field. "Mr. Stone, you have no right to speak about things you do not understand." "I understand plenty," Marcus shot back. "I understand that Crawford is a coward who hides behind a woman's skirts." "He is not hiding behind anyone," Sophia said, moving to stand beside Yates. "And if you knew anything about true courage, you would recognize it when you saw it." "Sophia, do not," Yates said quietly, but she shook her head. "No," she said firmly. "I am tired of watching good people be torn down by bullies." She turned to address the crowd. "Yates Crawford is the most honorable man I have met in this town. He keeps his word. He works harder than anyone else. And yes, he does not drink, but that is because he made a vow to his dying mother that he would not become like his father who drank himself into violence." The crowd had gone silent, listening intently now. "His father beat his mother until she died," Sophia continued, her voice thick with emotion. "And Yates, who was just 16 years old at the time, promised her that he would never touch alcohol. He has kept that promise for 8 years, even though it has cost him jobs, friendships, and respect. That is not cowardice. That is strength." Yates felt his throat tighten as Sophia spoke. He had never heard anyone defend him so passionately, had never imagined that someone would stand up for him this way. "And as for visiting my home," Sophia said, her chin raised defiantly. "Yes, Yates has visited me. We have become friends, and I value his company. If that offends anyone's sensibilities, then I am sorry, but I will not apologize for choosing my own friends." "It is not proper," one of the older women in the crowd said. A schoolteacher should be above reproach. I am above reproach, Sophia replied. I have done nothing wrong. And neither has Yates. Marcus laughed harshly. You are defending him because you have feelings for him. Everyone can see it. But what kind of future could you possibly have with a man like that? He has nothing. He is nothing. He is more than you will ever be, Sophia said fiercely. And yes, I do have feelings for him. I care about him deeply, and I am not ashamed of that. The crowd erupted in whispers and murmurs. Yates felt like he could not breathe. Sophia had just publicly declared her feelings for him, had put her reputation on the line completely. Sophia, he said quietly, urgently, you should not have, I should have, she interrupted, turning to look at him. I meant every word. Yates looked into her eyes and saw nothing but certainty and affection. Something broke open in his chest, some last barrier he had been holding on to out of fear and self-protection. I care about you too, he said, his voice rough but clear enough for those nearby to hear. More than I can properly express. You have given me something I thought I had lost forever. Hope. Then he turned to face the crowd, his heart pounding but his voice steady. Marcus Stone is right about one thing. I have nothing to offer. No money, no land, no family name. All I have is my word and my willingness to work. But I am tired of running from my past. I am tired of letting other people define who I am. He took a deep breath. My father was a violent drunk. He killed my mother with his fists and his rage, and when he came for me with a knife the night after her funeral, I fought back. I nearly killed him. That is the truth I have been running from. I left home because I was afraid of what I might become, afraid that I had his violence in me. The crowd was completely silent now, hanging on his every word. But I am not my father, Yates continued, his voice growing stronger. I made a choice to be different. I made a vow to honor my mother's memory by staying sober and working hard and treating people with respect, and I have kept that vow. I will keep it for the rest of my life. He looked at Marcus Stone directly. You say I am a coward because I will not fight you. But I am not afraid of you. I am afraid of becoming the kind of man who settles everything with violence. I have seen where that leads, and I want no part of it. Peterson stood up then, his weathered face serious. I have employed a lot of men in my years, he said to the crowd. And I can tell you that Yates Crawford is the finest worker I have ever had. He is honest, reliable, and skilled. Any ranch would be lucky to have him. I agree, another voice called out. It was Jackson Miller, who owned a large ranch south of town. I saw Crawford break 3 wild horses last month. Did a better job than my best wranglers. Marcus has been spreading lies about him, but I have seen the truth with my own eyes. Several other people began to speak up, sharing times when they had seen Yates working or interacting with others in town. Not everyone spoke in his favor, but enough did that the tide began to shift. Finally, the mayor stood up. It seems to me, he said carefully, that we have been quick to judge based on rumors rather than facts. Mr. Crawford has committed no crime. He has worked honestly and kept to himself. If some people have a problem with his personal choices, well, that is their problem, not his. Marcus Stone looked furious. This is not over, he said, glaring at Yates. Yes, it is, Sophia said firmly. You have done enough damage, Mr. Stone, and if you continue to harass Yates or anyone who associates with him, I will make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of man you are. You are making a mistake, Marcus said to her. Both of you, you will regret this. The only thing I regret, Sophia replied, is not standing up to you sooner. Marcus stormed off, taking his core group of supporters with him. But most of the crowd remained, and gradually the festival returned to its normal activities, though Yates could feel that something fundamental had changed. As the sun began to set and the festival wound down, Yates and Sophia found themselves walking together along the edge of the field away from the crowds. "Thank you," Yates said quietly, "for what you did today, for standing up for me when no one else would." "Someone had to," Sophia replied. "And I meant what I said, all of it." They stopped walking and Yates turned to face her fully. The last rays of sunlight caught in her hair, turning it to bronze and gold. "You put everything at risk for me," he said. "Your job, your reputation. You are worth the risk," Sophia said simply. "Yates, I have never felt this way about anyone before. I know we have not known each other very long, but I cannot imagine my life without you in it now." Yates reached out and gently took her hand, marveling at how perfectly it fit in his. "I love you," he said, the words feeling both terrifying and inevitable. "I have loved you since that first night in the saloon when you stood up for me. I just did not think I deserved someone like you." "You deserve every good thing," Sophia said, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "And I love you too, so much it scares me sometimes." "What do we do now?" Yates asked. "I still have nothing to offer you, no house, no savings." "You have yourself," Sophia said. "That is all I need. We will figure out the rest together." Yates pulled her closer, wrapping his arms around her. She fit against him perfectly, her head tucking under his chin. They stood like that for a long moment, two people who had found something precious in each other, something worth fighting for. "Will you marry me?" Yates asked suddenly, the question surprising even himself. "I know it is too soon, and I should wait and do this properly, but I cannot help myself. I want to spend my life with you, Sophia. I want to build something real and lasting. Will you marry me?" Sophia pulled back just enough to look up at him, and the smile on her face was like sunrise breaking over the prairie. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you." Yates kissed her then, gently at first and then with all the emotion he had been holding back. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard, and Yates felt like he could float away with happiness. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Peterson offered Yates a permanent position as ranch foreman with a proper wage, saying he needed someone he could trust to help run the place as he got older. With that security, Yates was able to start saving money and making plans for a future. The wedding was set for December, giving them just enough time to prepare. It would be a simple ceremony in the church, followed by a reception in the schoolhouse. Sophia insisted she did not need anything elaborate, just Yates and a promise before God and their community. Marcus Stone continued to make trouble where he could, but his influence had waned significantly after the Harvest Festival. Most people in Valentine had come to respect Yates for his honesty and hard work, and they appreciated Sophia's dedication as a teacher. The couple had their supporters, and that made all the difference. One cold afternoon in late November, Yates was working on building a small house on Peterson's land, a wedding gift from the old man, who had insisted that the newlyweds would need their own space. Yates was framing out the walls when he heard horses approaching. He looked up to see three men riding toward him, and his stomach tightened when he recognized them as associates of Marcus Stone. "Crawford," one of them called out as they dismounted. "We need to talk to you." Yates set down his hammer and faced them, keeping his hands visible and his posture non-threatening. "What about?" "Marcus wants you to know that he has not forgotten what you did," the man said. "You made him look like a fool in front of the whole town." "I did not do anything to Marcus," Yates replied calmly. "I just told the truth about myself." "You turned people against him," another man said. "And you are marrying the schoolteacher, which makes you think you are better than the rest of us." "I do not think that at all," Yates said. "I just want to live my life in peace." "Well, you cannot," the first man said, and suddenly he pulled a gun from his belt. "Marcus says you need to be taught a lesson." Yates felt his blood run cold, but he kept his voice steady. Shooting an unarmed man will not teach anyone anything except that you are cowards. We are not going to shoot you, the man said with a nasty grin. We are just going to rough you up a bit, make sure you understand your place. They advanced on him, and Yates knew he had a choice to make. He could run, which would only delay the inevitable. Or he could fight, which would mean breaking his commitment to avoiding violence. Or he could stand his ground and take whatever they dished out, proving that he would not compromise his principles even under threat. But before he could decide, another voice rang out across the yard. That is far enough. Yates looked over to see Sophia riding up fast, followed by Peterson on his old mare and several other men from town, including Jackson Miller and the mayor. What is the meaning of this? The mayor demanded as the group surrounded the three men. Are you threatening Mr. Crawford? The man with the gun looked suddenly uncertain, realizing they were outnumbered. We were just talking, he said, holstering his weapon. It looked like more than talking to me, Peterson said grimly. Looked like you were about to assault my foreman. Marcus Stone sent you, did he not? Sophia asked, her voice hard as steel. She dismounted and walked straight up to the three men without a hint of fear. He is too much of a coward to face Yates himself, so he sends his lackeys to do his dirty work. Now hold on, one of the men protested. No, you hold on, Jackson Miller interrupted. We have had enough of this nonsense. Marcus has been stirring up trouble for months, and it ends today. You go back and tell him that if he or anyone associated with him threatens Yates Crawford again, there will be consequences. Legal consequences. The mayor nodded. I will personally ensure that charges are filed for assault and intimidation, and Marcus will answer for sending you here. The three men looked at each other uneasily, then mounted their horses. This is not over, one of them muttered, but there was no conviction in his voice. Yes, it is, Sophia said firmly, and you can tell Marcus Stone that he has lost. Yates has more friends in this town than he does, and we will not let him be bullied anymore. After the men rode off, Yates stood there feeling overwhelmed. How did you know? He asked Sophia. One of my students saw those men following you and told me, she explained. I immediately went to get help. I was so afraid we would be too late. Yates pulled her into his arms, not caring who saw. You saved me, he said quietly. Again. We saved each other, Sophia corrected. That is what we do. Peterson clapped Yates on the shoulder. Son, you have got yourself a fierce woman there. Better hold on to her. I intend to, Yates said, looking down at Sophia with love and gratitude, for the rest of my life. The wedding took place on a bright December morning, with fresh snow covering the ground and sunlight streaming through the church windows. Sophia wore a simple white dress that her students' mothers had helped her sew, and she carried wildflowers that had been dried and preserved. Yates stood at the altar in his best clothes, his hair neatly combed and his hands shaking slightly with nerves and excitement. When Sophia walked down the aisle, Yates felt his breath catch. She was beautiful, but more than that, she was his. This remarkable woman who had stood up for him when no one else would, who had seen past his flaws and fears to the man he was trying to become, was choosing to spend her life with him. The ceremony was simple and heartfelt. They exchanged vows in front of half the town, promising to love and honor each other through whatever challenges came their way. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Yates kissed Sophia with all the tenderness and passion he felt, and the church erupted in applause. The reception in the schoolhouse was lively, with food and dancing and well wishes from neighbors and friends. Even some of the people who had been skeptical about Yates showed up to congratulate the couple, won over by the obvious love between them and Yates's proven character. Marcus Stone did not attend, which was no surprise, but his absence felt like a relief rather than a slight. He had already lost his influence, and word around town was that he was planning to leave Valentine for opportunities elsewhere. Yates felt no satisfaction in his enemy's defeat, only gratitude that the threat was finally over. As the evening drew to a close and guests began to leave, Yates and Sophia slipped away to their new house. It was small but well built, with a bedroom, a main room for cooking and living, and a porch that looked out over Peterson's ranch and the prairie beyond. "Home," Sophia said softly as they stepped inside. "Our home." "Our home," Yates repeated, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "I never thought I would have this. A home, a wife, a future." "You have it now," Sophia said, turning in his arms to face him. "We have it, together." They made love that night with a tenderness that took Yates's breath away. Sophia's touch healing old wounds he had not known were still bleeding. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the bed Yates had built with his own hands, and he felt a peace he had never known before. "Thank you," he whispered into her hair. "For what?" Sophia asked sleepily. "For standing up for me that day in the saloon," Yates said. "For seeing something in me worth defending. For changing my life." "You changed your own life," Sophia said. "You made the choice to stay and fight for what you wanted. I just gave you a reason to do it." "You gave me everything," Yates corrected. "And I vow to stand beside you always, just as you stood beside me. Whatever comes, we will face it together." "Together," Sophia agreed, and in that single word Yates heard all the promise of their future. The winter passed peacefully, with Yates working hard at the ranch and Sophia continuing to teach. They settled into married life with an ease that surprised them both, as if they had been made to fit together. Yates found that he enjoyed coming home to Sophia each evening, sharing meals and conversation, waking up beside her each morning. In the spring, Marcus Stone left Valentine for good, taking his closest supporters with him. The town breathed a collective sigh of relief, and the atmosphere became notably friendlier. Yates found himself invited to help with community projects, his opinions sought on matters related to ranching and horses. He was becoming a respected member of the community, something he had never imagined possible. By summer, Sophia discovered she was pregnant. The news filled them both with joy and a little fear. They had not planned to start a family so soon, but Yates found himself excited at the prospect of being a father. He was determined to be nothing like his own father, to give his child the love and stability he had never known. "What if I am not good at it?" he asked Sophia one evening as they sat on their porch watching the sunset. Her hand rested on her still flat stomach, and Yates covered it with his own. "You will be wonderful," Sophia assured him. "You are patient and kind and strong, everything a father should be." "I never had an example to follow," Yates said quietly. "Then you will be the example," Sophia replied. "For our child and for yourself. You will show them that it is possible to break a cycle, to choose a different path." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, and Sophia continued teaching until late in the fall when her condition made it too difficult. The school board arranged for a temporary replacement, with the understanding that Sophia would return once the baby was old enough. Their son was born on a cold January night in 1885, with the help of the town midwife and Peterson's wife, who had come out of her quiet life to assist. Yates paced outside the bedroom for hours, terrified and hopeful in equal measure. When he finally heard the baby's cry, strong and healthy, he felt tears stream down his face. The midwife came out and smiled at him. "You have a son," she said, "and your wife is asking for you." Yates went into the bedroom on shaking legs. Sophia lay in bed looking exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in soft blankets. "Come meet your son," she said softly. Yates approached the bed and looked down at the baby. He had dark hair like Yates and his mother's delicate features. His eyes were closed, his small fist curled against his cheek. Yates felt something break open in his chest, a love so fierce and immediate it took his breath away. "He is perfect," Yates whispered. "He is ours," Sophia said. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names, but looking at his son now, Yates knew exactly what felt right. "Thomas," he said, "after your father." Sophia's eyes filled with tears. Her father had died when she was young, but she had loved him dearly despite his harsh nature. "Are you sure?" "I am sure," Yates said. "Thomas Crawford, a good strong name for a good strong boy." He carefully took his son in his arms, marveling at how small and fragile he felt. "I promise you," he said to the baby, his voice thick with emotion, "that I will always protect you. I will teach you to be kind and strong and true to your word. I will never hurt you or your mother. I will be the father I never had." Sophia reached up and touched his face. "I know you will," she said. "I have always known." The years that followed were the happiest of Yates's life. Thomas grew from a baby into a curious, energetic toddler who followed his father everywhere, chattering constantly and asking endless questions. Yates taught him about horses and cattle, about the prairie and the seasons, about keeping promises and treating people with respect. When Thomas was 3, they had a daughter they named Catherine, and 2 years after that, another son they called William. The little house Yates had built became too small, so he expanded it, adding rooms and a larger porch. Peterson eventually retired and sold Yates half the ranch, making him a partner rather than just a foreman. It was more than Yates had ever dreamed of owning. Sophia returned to teaching part-time, with arrangements made so she could bring the youngest children with her when needed. The community had come to love and respect both her and Yates, seeing them as examples of integrity and commitment. Marcus Stone was rarely mentioned anymore, though occasionally they heard news through travelers. He had apparently moved to Wyoming and started a ranch there, far enough away that he was no longer a concern. Yates felt no lingering anger toward him, only pity for a man who had let bitterness consume him. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Yates and Sophia sat on their porch after putting the children to bed, watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. Yates held Sophia's hand, his thumb tracing lazy circles on her palm. "You remember that day in the saloon?" Sophia asked. "When I first spoke up for you, I remember everything about that day," Yates replied. "It changed my life." "You changed your own life," Sophia said, echoing her words from their wedding night. "But I am glad I could be part of it." "You are not just part of it," Yates said, turning to look at her. "You are everything. You stood up for me when others mocked, and I vowed to stand beside you always. That is exactly what I have tried to do." "And you have," Sophia assured him. "Every single day you have kept that promise. You have been my partner, my love, my best friend." "I never thought I would have this," Yates said, gesturing to the house, the ranch, the life they had built. "I thought I was destined to always be running, always alone, but you saw something in me worth fighting for." "I saw you," Sophia said simply. "Not your past, not your fears, just you, and I fell in love with what I saw." Yates pulled her close, and they sat together in comfortable silence, listening to the sounds of the prairie at night. Inside, their children slept safely in their beds. Around them, the ranch thrived under their care. And ahead of them stretched countless more years together, building on the foundation of love and trust they had created. "Thank you," Yates said quietly, "for everything, for standing up for me, for believing in me, for loving me." "Thank you," Sophia replied, "for having the courage to stay, for choosing to build a life here instead of running, for being the man I always knew you could be." They sat together until the stars were bright overhead. Two people who had found in each other exactly what they needed, exactly when they needed it. Yates thought about the scared, lonely man he had been when he first arrived in Valentine, compared to the man he was now. A husband, a father, a landowner, a respected member of the community. None of it would have been possible without Sophia. She had stood up for him when others mocked, had defended him when he could not defend himself, had seen his worth when everyone else saw only weakness. And in return, he had kept his vow to stand beside her always, through good times and hard times, through every challenge and triumph. As the night grew colder, they finally went inside, checking on their sleeping children before retiring to their own room. Yates held Sophia as they drifted off to sleep, grateful beyond words for the life they had built together. The years continued to pass, bringing new challenges and new joys. Thomas grew into a responsible young man who inherited his father's skill with horses and his mother's quick mind. Catherine became a teacher like Sophia, opening a school in a neighboring town. William showed an aptitude for ranching and stayed to help run the growing operation. Yates and Sophia grew old together, their love deepening with each passing year. They faced droughts and harsh winters, economic downturns and personal losses. But through it all, they stood beside each other, just as they had promised. Peterson passed away when Thomas was 15, leaving his half of the ranch to Yates with the stipulation that it always remain in the Crawford family. Yates honored that request, building the ranch into one of the most successful operations in the region through hard work, fair dealing, and the respect he had earned from his neighbors. One evening, when Yates was 52 and Sophia was 51, they sat together on their porch watching their grandchildren play in the yard. Thomas had married a kind woman from town and had 3 children of his own. Catherine visited often with her husband and 2 daughters. William was courting a rancher's daughter from the next county over. "We did well," Sophia said, watching the children with a contented smile. "We did," Yates agreed, "better than I ever imagined possible." "Do you ever think about that first day?" Sophia asked. "When I walked into the saloon and told Marcus Stone to leave you alone, all the time," Yates admitted. "It was the bravest thing I had ever seen. You had no reason to stand up for me, but you did anyway." "I had every reason," Sophia corrected. "I saw a good man being treated poorly and I could not stay silent. It was that simple." "It changed everything," Yates said. "If you had not spoken up that day, I would have left Valentine. I would have kept running, would never have stayed long enough to build a life here." "But you did stay," Sophia said. "That was your choice, not mine. I just gave you a push in the right direction." Yates pulled her close and she rested her head on his shoulder. They had had this conversation many times over the years, each of them crediting the other for the life they had built. The truth, Yates knew, was that they had both been necessary. Sophia's courage in standing up for him, and his courage in choosing to stay and fight for what he wanted. "I love you," he said, words he had spoken thousands of times but which never lost their power. "I love you too," Sophia replied. "Always." The sun set over the prairie, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and gold. Their grandchildren's laughter rang out across the yard, a sound of pure joy that filled Yates with contentment. He had spent so many years running from his past, convinced he did not deserve happiness or belonging. But Sophia had shown him that he was worthy, that his past did not define his future, that he could choose to be better than where he came from. More than that, she had given him the most precious gift of all. She had seen him. Not the scared, scarred man others saw when they looked at him, but the person he was capable of becoming. She had stood up for him when others mocked, had defended him when he had no voice, had believed in him when he had stopped believing in himself. And in return, he had kept his vow. He had stood beside her through everything, had been her partner and protector, had built with her a life worth living. Together, they had created something beautiful out of pain and fear. A family, a home, a legacy of love and integrity that would continue long after they were gone. As the stars began to appear overhead, Yates held Sophia close and felt a peace that went bone deep. He had found what he had been searching for all those years ago when he first arrived in Valentine with nothing but a horse and the clothes on his back. He had found home. He had found love. He had found himself. And it had all started with one brave woman who refused to stay silent when she saw injustice, who stood up for a stranger when everyone else looked away, who believed that people deserved to be judged by their character rather than their circumstances. Sophia had saved him in that saloon all those years ago. And every day since, he had tried to be worthy of that salvation, to honor the faith she had placed in him, to be the man she had always believed he could be. As they sat together on the porch of the home they had built, surrounded by the family they had created, Yates knew that he had succeeded. He was no longer the scared, lonely man running from his past. He was Yates Crawford, husband, father, grandfather, rancher, and respected member of his community. He was a man who kept his promises, who stood by his principles, who loved deeply and completely. And beside him, as she had always been, was Sophia. His defender, his love, his partner in building this remarkable life. She had stood up for him when others mocked, and he had kept his vow to stand beside her always. Together, they had proven that love and courage could overcome any obstacle, that two people committed to each other could build something lasting and beautiful. The children called them in for dinner, and Yates and Sophia stood, their movements slower than they once were, but their hands still fitting perfectly together as they walked inside. The house was full of noise and laughter, the kind of chaos that came from having 3 generations under one roof. Yates looked around at his family, at the life he and Sophia had created, and felt a gratitude so profound it brought tears to his eyes. This was what happiness looked like. This was what home felt like. And it had all been possible because one woman had the courage to speak up, and one man had found the strength to stay. As they gathered around the table for the meal, Yates caught Sophia's eye across the crowded room. She smiled at him, that same warm smile that had captured his heart 28 years ago, and he smiled back. No words were needed. They both knew exactly what they had in each other, exactly how blessed they were to have found this love. The meal was lively, with grandchildren asking questions and Thomas discussing ranch business and Catherine sharing stories from her school. Yates listened to it all with contentment, occasionally adding his own thoughts, but mostly just enjoying being surrounded by the people he loved most. After dinner, the family gathered in the main room. William brought out his guitar and played songs while the grandchildren danced and the adults talked. Yates sat with Sophia on the settee they had purchased together 15 years ago, her hand in his, watching their family with deep satisfaction. "We should tell them the story," Sophia said quietly, "about how we met. The children are old enough to understand now." Yates nodded. He had told bits and pieces over the years, but never the full story. "All right," he agreed, "but you should be the one to tell it. You are better with words." Sophia smiled and stood, calling for everyone's attention. The room gradually quieted and all eyes turned to her. "I want to tell you all a story," she said, "about the day I met your grandfather and how one moment of courage changed both our lives forever." She told them about the saloon, about Marcus Stone's mockery, about her decision to speak up for a stranger she had never met. She told them about Yates's past, about his vow to his mother, about the struggles they had faced together. The children listened with rapt attention, and even Thomas, who had heard parts of this before, was captivated by his mother's telling. "The point of this story," Sophia said as she finished, "is that standing up for what is right is never the wrong choice. Your grandfather was being treated unfairly, and I could not stay silent. I did not know it would lead to love and marriage and this wonderful family. I just knew it was the right thing to do." "But it was Grandpa's choice too," Catherine said thoughtfully. "He could have left town, but he stayed." "That is right," Yates said, speaking for the first time. "Your grandmother gave me a reason to stay, but I had to make the choice. I had to decide that I was worthy of building a life here, that my past did not have to define my future." "And we are so glad you did," Thomas said warmly. "Everything we have comes from that choice." The evening continued with more songs and stories, and eventually the grandchildren were put to bed in the various rooms of the house. Thomas and his family would stay the night before heading back to their own place in the morning. Catherine and her family were visiting for the week. William still lived on the ranch in a smaller house Yates had built for him. When everyone had finally settled down for the night, Yates and Sophia returned to their bedroom. They prepared for bed in comfortable silence, a routine they had perfected over nearly 3 decades of marriage. "That was a good evening," Sophia said as they climbed into bed. "Every evening with you is a good evening," Yates replied, pulling her close. They lay together in the darkness, listening to the sounds of the house settling around them. Yates thought about everything they had built together, everything they had overcome. He thought about the scared young man he had been and the confident, content older man he had become. "Sophia," he said quietly, "I need you to know something." "What is it?" "You saved my life," Yates said. "Not just by standing up for me that day, but every day since. You made me believe I was worth saving. You gave me a reason to be better, to do better. I would not be the man I am without you." "And I would not be the woman I am without you," Sophia replied. "You showed me what true strength looks like. You proved that keeping your word matters more than public opinion. You taught our children, through your example, how to be people of integrity." "We did that together," Yates said. "Yes," Sophia agreed. "Together. Always together." They fell asleep in each other's arms as they had done for thousands of nights before, and when morning came they woke to a new day full of the simple joys of family and work and life on the ranch they had built together. The years continued to pass, bringing changes and constants in equal measure. The children grew and had families of their own. The ranch continued to thrive under the management of Yates, and then, gradually, under William, who took on more responsibility as his father grew older. Yates and Sophia grew old gracefully, their love for each other never diminishing. They were a fixture in Valentine, respected and admired by all who knew them. The story of how they met, of Sophia standing up for Yates in that saloon so many years ago, became something of a legend in town, told to new generations as an example of courage and love. When Yates was 70 years old, he and Sophia celebrated their 46th wedding anniversary surrounded by their children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren. The party was held at the ranch, with people coming from all over the county to celebrate with them. As the celebration wound down and the sun began to set, Yates and Sophia found themselves once again on their porch, watching the sky turn brilliant colors. 46 years, Sophia said wonderingly. "It seems like yesterday and a lifetime ago all at once." "Best 46 years of my life," Yates said. "Every single day with you has been a gift, even the hard days." Sophia asked with a smile. "Especially the hard days," Yates replied, "because we faced them together." They sat in silence for a while, comfortable in each other's presence as they had always been. Finally, Sophia spoke again. "You have any regrets?" she asked, Yates considered the question carefully. "Only one," he said finally. "I regret that I wasted so many years running before I found you. But even that led me here, so perhaps it was necessary." "Everything that happened brought us to this moment," Sophia said. "I would not change a thing." "Neither would I," Yates agreed. He took her hand and raised it to his lips, kissing it gently. "You stood up for me when others mocked, and I vowed to stand beside you always. That is the promise I made, and I have kept it every day of our marriage." "I know," Sophia said softly. "And I have stood beside you too. That is what love is, Yates. Not grand gestures or dramatic moments, though we have had those. It is choosing each other every single day through everything life brings." "I choose you," Yates said, "today and always." "And I choose you," Sophia replied. They stayed on the porch until the stars came out. Two people who had built a life of meaning and purpose together, who had raised a family and created a legacy that would continue long after they were gone. They had proven that one moment of courage could change everything, that standing up for what was right mattered, that love could overcome any obstacle. As they finally made their way inside for the night, Yates looked back at the porch one more time, remembering all the evenings they had spent there over the years. All the conversations and silences, the laughter and tears, the simple peace of being together. This was the life he had built. This was the love he had found. This was the man he had become. And it had all started with a woman who refused to stay silent when she saw injustice, who stood up for a stranger in a saloon, who believed that everyone deserved to be treated with dignity and respect. Sophia had given him that chance all those years ago. And Yates had spent every day since trying to be worthy of it, trying to honor the faith she had placed in him, trying to build a life that would make her proud. Looking at her now, her hair silver and her face lined with the years they had lived together, Yates knew he had succeeded. They had succeeded together in creating something beautiful and lasting. As they prepared for bed that night, moving through the familiar routines of a lifetime together, Yates felt a deep contentment settle over him. This was what he had been searching for all those years ago when he had stumbled into that saloon in Valentine, Nebraska. Not just love, though he had found that in abundance. Not just belonging, though he had that too. What he had found was himself. The man he was meant to be, the man he could never have become on his own. Sophia had seen that man when he could not see himself, had called him forth with her courage and her love, and he had answered that call. He had stayed when running would have been easier. He had fought for a future when his past tried to drag him down. He had chosen love over fear, hope over despair, commitment over convenience. Together they had built something remarkable. A family, a ranch, a legacy, a love story for the ages. As Yates drifted off to sleep that night, Sophia's hand in his as always, his last thought was one of gratitude. Gratitude for the twist of fate that had brought them together, for the courage Sophia had shown in standing up for him, for the strength he had found to stay and fight for what he wanted. He had found his home. He had found his love. He had found his purpose, and it had all been worth it. Every struggle, every challenge, every moment of doubt, all of it had led him here, to this bed beside this woman, surrounded by the life they had created together. She had stood up for him when others mocked. He had vowed to stand beside her always. And that promise, kept faithfully over 46 years of marriage and counting, had made all the difference. Their story would continue for a few more years, with more grandchildren born and more seasons passing on the ranch. But the essential truth of their love remained constant. They had found in each other exactly what they needed, exactly when they needed it. They had chosen each other every day, through everything life brought, and in the end, that was what mattered most. Not the grand gestures or dramatic moments, but the quiet faithfulness of two people committed to standing beside each other always. That was the legacy Yates Crawford and Sophia Jenkins Crawford left behind when their time finally came to an end. A legacy of love and courage, of integrity and commitment, of two people who had proven that standing up for what was right could change everything. Their children and grandchildren would tell their story for generations, keeping alive the memory of how one woman's courage in a saloon and one man's decision to stay had created something beautiful and lasting. The ranch would continue under the Crawford name, as Peterson had wished. The values Yates and Sophia had instilled in their family would be passed down through the generations. And their love story would endure as a reminder that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stand up for someone who cannot stand up for themselves. And the strongest thing you can do is choose to stay and build a life rather than running away. In Valentine, Nebraska, in the late 1800s, two people found each other against all odds. They built a life together that exceeded their wildest dreams. They loved deeply and completely, standing beside each other through every triumph and trial. And it all began with one simple act of courage. A woman standing up in a saloon and saying, "Leave him alone." That moment changed two lives forever, and its echoes would continue long after both of them were gone. A testament to the power of courage, the strength of love, and the truth that everyone deserves someone who will stand beside them, always.